Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, Enterprise Service Management, AI, and Emerging Technologies. Today's webinar is brought to you by Micro Focus, and there's a link to the Micro Focus website right in the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk window. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on our community site, HDI Connect. Please subscribe also to our podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud for great information from world-class experts. I'm Roy Atkinson, HDI's Senior Writer Analyst, and we have just a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. If you are experiencing any technical problems, refresh your browser. It usually works wonders. It's the best thing you can do. You can participate in question and answer session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and they'll be answered during the Q&A session toward the end of the webcast, as time permits. You can download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen. Be sure to check out the links you find there as well. There'll be two audience polls, and you can respond in the Vote tab below the presentation window. So you might want to locate the Attachments tab and the Vote tab before the presentation begins. And remember that today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder that it's available. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. And just a little bit of detail. I'll be speaking today along with Michael Potts of Micro Focus. Michael is a product marketing manager at Micro Focus, and his responsibilities include digital marketing, go-to-market planning, and sales enablement for service management software solutions. So let's start off by talking about a little bit about artificial intelligence, since that's one of our main topics today. There's a lot of confusion out there about what artificial intelligence actually is, and so here's a good working definition. It is human-like intelligence manifested through information, rules for using the information, and reasoning. In other words, using the rules to reach some conclusions. It's a little bit different from automation, which is simply a repeatable process that goes on without direct human intervention. So we have a lot of automation out there already, robotic process automation, for example. But AI is different. AI also includes self-correction. And one of the key components of artificial intelligence is machine learning, meaning the capability to improve as it goes without additional programming. So that's quite a bit different from standard knowledge-driven chatbots, for example. An AI-driven chatbot is a little bit different. And we're going to talk about some of the advantages that AI can give you if you are interested in enterprise service management. And what is enterprise service management? Well, our working definition is the first one here. From Stephen Mann, who's an analyst with ITSM Tools. And Stephen's definition is the use of IT service management principles or practice and technology outside of IT, so across the organization, using those same principles and practices, and hopefully as well using the same tools. Doug Tedder, who's another great member of the HDI community, says that it's a way to manage services and information as they flow through a value stream across an organization. So that's language that's very compatible with ITIL 4. ITIL 4 talks about value chain, service value chain, and the value streams across the organization, the route that's taken by the production of value as it goes across the organization and value to the customer at the other end. So that's two slightly different ways of looking at it. Just different language. The key is that it's outside of IT, including IT, of course, but outside of IT, and we're going to talk explicitly about some of the aspects of the organization where enterprise service management is really coming thing we want to look at is the extent of market penetration for service management solutions, which is very high. As you can see, the vast majority of organizations now have at least some type of service management solution, which means more than just ticketing. It means a lot of other processes are driven with the solution itself. And the capabilities of the various solutions tend to differ, and the ease of use certainly does tend to differ as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on, and I'm sure that Michael will want to get into that as well. But the vast majority of organizations now are using some type of service management tool. And the small percentage, 6%, that don't plan on using one are probably very small organizations to which there wouldn't be as much value. If you can walk across the hall to talk to somebody or get a process done, manually and efficiently within a small organization, it may not be good for that organization to invest in a full capability service management tool until they grow. And then the time will come. This is all HDI research, by the way, in case you were wondering where these stats are coming from. This is all HDI research. So here's a key question. Why enterprise service management? Why would an organization be interested in trying to promote the principles and practices of service management outside of IT? And here are some of the factors that drive the adoption of enterprise service management. The key one is to improve the customer experience. And we'll come back to that in a second. That is overwhelmingly the largest single factor that was cited by the respondents to this research. Expanded capabilities of service management solutions. Well, as time has gone on, the service management software tools themselves have improved and expanded their capabilities so that they become more compatible with different operations within the business, so that other lines of business outside of IT are able to take part. And also they can be adapted to assist those different lines of business. And we'll talk specifically about some of the lines of business that are doing exceptionally well with enterprise service management. Business need or challenge. Something comes up that requires increased capability, increased attention to the service management processes, and perhaps the drive for more similar user experience and across the organization. So you get people pointed in the same direction. You can have people from different lines of business doing things the same way, presenting a commonality of user experience and making things a little bit more streamlined across the organization. And we'll also talk a little bit more about that. And then to improve employee satisfaction and engagement. And we have some good evidence that in many organizations, employee satisfaction has really gone up quite a bit after the institution of enterprise service management strategies. And one of the reasons for that is, again, that there's a unified experience, that they can talk to people in the other lines of business across the organization and speak the same language. And they can also share processes. So let's take, for example, a common one, which is onboarding, where HR would take part, IT would take part, procurement might be taking part, facilities might be taking part, preparing an office for people or whatever. And all of those different lines of business can have a workflow that's driven from within the service management tool and therefore be much more efficient instead of handing off processes manually or doing things. Certainly doing things through email is not a very efficient way to do it. And yet that's the way that a lot of organizations have been doing it for a long time. So reasons like that are why organizations are really seeing that it's a good idea to get enterprise service management in place, start using these principles and practices that have been proven over a period of time in IT. And I'm going to come back to that point also. So which lines of business are adopting it? Well, customer service and support is certainly one of the big ones, and that makes real sense when you think about it. One of the ways in which service management tools have been used traditionally within IT is to help the service desk track and monitor and improve services, creating tickets when there's an incident or a service request, and so forth. Well, the same types of things happen in customer service and support, right? Somebody contacts customer service, they open a case, so the customer service department opens a ticket or a record. Operations are performed, the notes are made within that ticket system, and then it's either closed, resolved, however they do it, so that you can see that because of that common nature of those operations, that makes perfect sense for a customer service and support part of the organization to use the same approach as IT has. HR has become one of the biggest lines of business to adopt enterprise service management. They've become a big partner for IT, and part of the reason is that, as I mentioned, onboarding and offboarding are both involved processes that require multiple parts of the organization to coordinate with each other. And so it makes sense for HR kind of being a starting point. They're going to bring the hiring process to fruition, and when that person comes into the organization, a series of tasks takes place to make sure that the person gets their training when they arrive and their orientation and their credentials. And then there's also their IT section, which is to make sure that there's equipment for them, facilities is involved so that they have a place to go, and so forth, right across the organization. So HR is definitely very much involved in this. And since they also, like IT does, have a reach across the organization in a broad sense, it makes perfect sense for them to take part in this. However, I will make a note here, and I will suggest that one of the things you want to look at is the language that's contained in your enterprise service management tool, in the systems that you develop, in the catalogs you develop, to make sure that the language that you're using is compatible with the lines of business that are going to be taking part. For example, and this is one I point out all the time when I talk about this, is an incident is very different to HR from what it is to IT, okay? We think of an incident in IT as something broke. An incident for HR means something really bad happened. Somebody was hurt. Somebody really seriously violated company policies, and so forth. So an incident is a very touchy word when it comes to HR. So, and also different lines of business, different groups around the organization will have different ways of expressing things. So you need to be careful about the language that's used within the tool, and hopefully the tool that you're going to be using is flexible enough to allow the display of the proper language in the proper places, right? You want to be able to configure the tool correctly for the various lines of business. Facilities would certainly use it in a similar fashion to the way IT does, in that somebody either is going to make a service request. For example, we need a new office configured at this particular part of this particular building, and they'll go in and install everything that needs to be installed, the desks, the lighting, the wiring, whatever happens to happen. Or if there's a repair that needs to be made, facilities is going to get involved. The maintenance of the ventilation and air conditioning systems, all of that, similar to the way we do things in IT. Training, setting up classes, making sure the equipment's in place, all of the operations that have to take place, again, similar tasks, workflows can be set up within the IT service management tool, or the enterprise service management tool, as we should be calling it now. And then other various groups, depending on what the organization is. For example, one of the lines of business we see fairly commonly in higher education would be the admissions office, or the library, which has certain requirements and certain information that they want to make available. And one of the things to remember about this is that one of the biggest advantages of enterprise service management is if you're using a common tool across the organization, and it's not just about the tool, let me make that clear, but when you're using a common tool across the organization, you're also putting all these records into a common data pool so that HR will be able to get what it needs, and IT will be able to get what it needs, and the library and the admissions office and so forth will have access to information as it needs to be, as the system is configured, so that there's not a whole lot of duplicate entry of information. The systems of record can be configured so that each area sees what it's supposed to see and nothing else. For example, you would not necessarily want the folks in the facilities office being able to see the HR records. That would be a big no-no. So the tools are configurable so that the right information displays to the right people at the right time. But basically the data that it's based on are common to all of them, and having that common data pool creates tremendous efficiencies within the organization. Would you agree with that, Michael? I think that's one of the big selling points for enterprise service management from where I stand.
Yeah, definitely, Roy. Thanks for asking. And I was about to ask you, this is probably more a term from the IT world, but looking at the term here, lines of business, would you say that this also can be translated to business function or even corporate shared service provider, which sounds sort of techy, but this is what it is, right? It's different
Sure.
departments providing different sorts of services.
Yes, absolutely. Whatever your particular chosen terminology in your organization is for it, whether it's line of business, group, department, function, just to make sure that all those different parts, all the different moving parts of the organization can operate from a common platform. And it's important to note also that they're operating from, if we look back at Stephen Mann's definition, it's the principles and practices as well. It's not just the tool, but the principles and practices go along with it. So they're doing things sort of in the same way. Everybody does them in the same way. The drive toward consistent improvement is the same. The idea of setting up workflows is similar. The idea of updating records is similar. So all of those different areas within the business are doing things in ways that are compatible with their jobs, whatever that is, their functions within the organization, but also in a way that's compatible with the other lines of business. And that's really important, I think. And that creates, and that's where the employee satisfaction that I spoke about a couple of minutes ago tends to come from, is that you know how things are done basically from a principle and practice standpoint, and therefore you have that common language with the people in the same organization as you. You can talk to the facilities department in a way that makes sense to them and to you. You can have common language with HR and understand what they're saying in terms of their operations and in terms of your operations if you're an IT person, which you may or may not be. Not everybody on this webinar, I'm sure, is an IT person. So it's important to understand how this works and that the principles and practices are kind of a foundation that underlie the tool itself, right? Because service management tools were built on the service management practices and processes that IT has perfected, we hope, over a long period of time. They've certainly been around for a long period of time, and hopefully your organization does them well. And that's an important consideration, too. If you were intending to embark on an enterprise service management journey in your organization, a couple of things are important. As I mentioned, the language should be compatible with whatever other parts of the organization you're dealing with, right? Don't use the wrong term or don't try to force another part of the organization to use the wrong term because it's easier not to configure the tool to have a different word for HR than it does for IT. It's important to make sure that they're comfortable using it. And also that the understanding of how it works is common, but fundamentally, IT should be doing its job well, because it's going to be a very tough sell to do service management across the organization if IT often is in enterprise service management. And if IT is not doing the job very well, well, other parts of the organization are going to be skeptical about following IT's lead. This is an opportunity for people who have been doing service management for a long time to take the lead and demonstrate how it's done and why it's done the way it is. So it's definitely a big leadership opportunity for IT. So here's some of the processes and practices that are being applied, and it again, this pretty much makes very, very clear sense. Incident and service request management, very big. Why? Because those are very common, and as I mentioned, they're common not only for IT but also for organizations like facilities. Knowledge management is very common, and more so now because knowledge management, whether you realize it or not, is a big requirement for the future of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. Knowledge management is key to have the information in an accessible way so that if you start to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to what's going on in your organization, the knowledge is accessible. It's pretty hard even to configure a basic chatbot without good knowledge management, right? Where does it go to get the answers, and what answers is it going to display to the person who's asking a question of the chatbot? It has to be organized and consistent in such a way that it's presented to the end user or customer well and consistently. So when they use that tool, a service catalog, what's being offered, what can I do for each part of the organization? Change management, what's going on, when is the next iteration of this particular thing going to happen? And that's not only in IT, but consider facilities for change management, right? They have to have change management capability. Customer relationship management, super important. And again, we go back to the fact that 77% of the people in this particular study said that their organization was taking on enterprise service management because they wanted to improve the customer experience. So good customer relationship management is a big part of it. Problem management. Let's get at the basic underlying reasons why something might be happening the way it's happening and see if we can address that. And just a quick note that there's rarely a root cause. There are usually multiple root causes, but you'll never find out what they are unless you go looking. It's much better to go looking than to abdicate your responsibility and do guesswork. Asset management, how important is that, right? Regardless of where you are in the organization, it's really good to know where things are, how they're being used, what they're attached to, et cetera, et cetera. So making sure that your software is licensed, your hardware is in order, you know where things are is extremely important. And requirements management, financial management, even though that's a low percentage, we know that people are doing financial management throughout the organization. They may just not be following the service management principles and practices just yet, but as this takes hold, there's going to be more common usage of the practices and processes, and people will be doing things much more in parallel to each other. And supplier management, reaching outside the organization, making sure that things are being procured and brought in and available to all parts of the organization as needed. So all of those are the highest use ones that we found when we asked what exactly people are doing within the organization. And so how can artificial intelligence help with, because that's kind of the subtitle of our talk today here is about AI. So let's think about this. Analytics, so important today to try to figure out what's going on and what might happen, what can happen. Text analytics, speech analytics, video. And that can feed into workflow optimization and automation, again, going back to automation being repetitive processes without human intervention. Analytics are so important. We've heard a lot over the past few years about big data. and the availability of data to be analyzed and present things like predictive analytics. So what's the customer growth going to look like? What's their response going to be to a new product? What might go wrong in our complex IT systems? All of those analytics underlie the machine learning and artificial intelligence process. A lot of analytics going on there. The discovery and management of network attached assets. Well, that's pretty straightforward, except that it used to be easy because everything was on your own internal network. Not so much anymore. With multiple cloud services and software as a service and some internal data center things that you might have in your organization, that environment has become increasingly complex, and we need better ways to be able to find it, assess it, know what it is, and monitor it. Cybersecurity. The changes that happen every day in cybersecurity, the requirements to modify your firewall, 5,000 times a day. How can you do that manually? You really can't. And so I think artificial intelligence is going to be a very big tool in cybersecurity as time goes on. Michael, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely, because also, the huge amount of data, that needs to be looked at and analyzed in order to find patterns, I think, in cybersecurity is immense. If even let's call it standard service desk data, which I will gonna talk about a little bit later, since my special area is not necessarily the whole area of security management, but it touches definitely enterprise service management and the service and help desk or whatever you call it. So AI really is the enabling technology, probably for the first time, that can deal with this very huge amount of data and make sense out of it. Yeah, short answer is yes, sure, I agree.
Yeah, good. There's a quote that goes around. It's from the CIO of a large American financial institution, and basically he says that we're at a point now in the acquisition of data from all different sources. We have so much data at our disposal that we can't look through it all by any stretch. And so it's good to have this type of artificial intelligence and machine learning be able to sift through the information to try to help us find what's important, so we can be able to ask questions and get answers quickly, and maybe we can get some assistance in decision making going forward. We can base our decision on better data analysis with this huge data pool that we have accruing. As I mentioned right at the top there, analytics of all those different sorts are exceedingly important. And then we get down to use of virtual agents or bots. Not that every virtual agent, or virtual agents more so, but not all bots are certainly AI enabled. But a lot of them are now becoming natural language processing, NLP enabled. And I was just in Japan at a conference in Japan, and one of the presenters there did a study of quite a few businesses across Asia Pacific, and they found that something like 4,500 referrals per month were coming off chatbots that were not AI enabled. When they had an AI enabled chatbot, only 600 were coming off that. In other words, being referred to a different channel. So human intervention much less required when you have some intelligence behind these chatbots or bot virtual agents. And then real-time enterprise-wide metrics. Again, as I was talking earlier about that enterprise-wide data pool, once you have that, you're able to get metrics much more easily across the entire organization. So if you're in an executive position, you can have a dashboard that gives you 3, 4, 5 key metrics that you can follow in real time and give you a much better handle on things that are going on in the organization, even as we speak, right? When we say real time, we mean real time. So there's a tremendous amount to be gained as you get farther into enterprise service management. And let's hand it over now to Michael, who's going to talk about some other aspects of this. And then we're going to have a couple of polls, as I mentioned at the top. So make sure you know where the vote tab is going to be. Okay? Michael, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. Yeah, let's talk a little bit also about business drivers. So we saw a lot of, I think, interesting data coming from surveys, and we'll see as we move along in this presentation here that this data nicely connects with what we experience as a software solution vendor from providing products and solutions for sure. So which is not an accident, I guess, as we will see, because this is exactly because of the data we just saw. So stepping back, and starting maybe 10 or 20,000 feet, looking at it, it's the, and later on I have more information like ebooks and white papers where you can find more information around that. But in a nutshell, what we found these days is that many, if not all, companies are in front or in the middle of what is called a digital transformation. And as part of this digital transformation, these companies often need to sort of reinvent themselves, at least partially, not entirely for sure, as you can imagine. So this can mean, for example, that there will be an impact on the services they offer. It often also, in almost all cases, has an impact on how they engage with their customers and employees. And I'm using customers and employees not throughout the whole presentation, so sometimes I just talk about employees or customers. These are the end users, if you want, that need to be satisfied. And I mentioned that because, again, that also ties back to one of the key findings from the survey that Roy talked about, where it also was, very high on the list. That one of the business drivers was the customer experience. So anyways, just so you know. So, and as a consequence of this, they need to think about their what is called the back office operations, if you want, and that's why you have this tagline here on the visual, because the back office needs to become the new front office in order to provide this employee and customer experience, and looking inside out to gain efficiencies and save costs. So some of these challenges is what you see on the visual. Services are everywhere within and across the company, like we saw in business functions, like finance, like education, like HR, like facilities, which are like the top ones, and the ones that are always mentioned if somebody discusses ESM. So the point here is services are not just in IT. IT has to support most of these services. Think about HR. Think about a payslip. A payslip that comes from electronic systems, from computers. That's IT. So it's very similar. And again, I just can, repeat what Roy says. As an example, think about an employee who needs help with such a pay slip. This is like a support case, if you want. So, or consumerization drives expectation. That's another thing I wanted to point out here. In this world of mobile applications, customers and employees alike are seeking, including ourselves, for a similar service and support experience during our work times that we got used to, during off work times. Think about social media. Think about all these portals we use, application portals, marketplaces, and the like, voice-controlled interaction, with all kinds of services. We also want to have this experience if we've got a problem during our workday. I mean, let's face it. Number 3, this really is a no-brainer. It already has been a no-brainer, within IT, which is like automation is mandatory. The times where you do things manually and using spreadsheets, especially in this fast day and age with the expectations and with the demand growing, that simply doesn't work anymore. So that's one thing. And then last but not least, that's probably more like a summary in terms of what it is that you will gain if you address these challenges. Agility and efficiency are key. Again, changing demands from the business, changing demands from employees and customers. These all need to be met under constraints like cost envelopes and the like, you name it. So having that said, again, only repeating here because that's what we observe, that's what we discuss when talking to our clients, customers, and prospects, is that what are these services? It's which lines of business are adopting ESM, and in fact, again, you can see the list here is very similar to the one that we saw earlier. Human resources and facilities management is very high. Finance and accounting is also what we see. Sales, marketing, education is not on the list here, but and again, at the end of the day, be it an employee asking to exchange a defect light bulb or another employee asking for help with a malfunctioning computer, both are looking for getting is to say it that way, very simple. It's either about requesting something or getting something fixed. The payslip is not correct, the light bulb is defect, the computer doesn't work, I forgot my password, I cannot pull a sales report, whatever you name it. It's from a structural and conceptual perspective, all these services and the support services that are required across the business functions are similar, right? And again, this is not about the tools at this stage yet. I also going to mention a little bit about the tool business later on. But so with that, I think we have a poll ready to pull off, right?
We do indeed. So if you would look just right by your BrightTALK window and locate the Vote tab, you can go into there. I'm going to launch a poll. And the question we have for you is, do you already use IT service management software for enterprise service management? Let's see how many of you are already using your ITSM tool for enterprise service management. And we'll give you some time to vote on that. And we'll just give you a visual display of the question as well. I'll just go to our question slide here. So just go into the Vote tab and register your organization's approach there. Are you doing it already? Are you getting ready to do it? Not doing it yet? Just give us a yes or a no. And we'll give you just a few more seconds to respond. And then I'll stop the voting right now and then give it a second to tabulate the final votes. And so it looks like 69% of you say yes, you are doing enterprise service management with your ITSM software, and about 30% of you are not. So let's say a third of you are not, about 2/3 of you are. That's a pretty good split. So maybe we'd like to know more about what your experience has been like. And we think, because of what we know from our surveys and for what Michael has just said with their experience at Micro Focus with their customers, that your experience has been similar, and we hope that you're putting your tools to some of the uses that you're seeing today. Good. So about 2/3 versus 1/3. Cool. Thank you. Okay, Michael?
Thank you also from my side. I guess I had to unmute. So, let me go back, sorry, one slide. And let's not spend too much time, because there is a pattern in these first 4 slides when I talked about, what is digital transformation? What does it mean that the back office needs to become the new front office? Then what are examples of non-IT departments? And then there is some triggers or compelling business events or whatever you want to call them. There must be some reasons out there in order to if you belong, for example, to these 30% that answered no, that you need to think about and look at, what ESM could mean to you and what the values and benefits could be that you could get out of them. Again, regardless of the tool for now, right? And let me pick two or maybe three here because there's a lot to discuss, but users demand more faster. That's an easy one, but again, it's very, very important because according to the survey results that Roy presented, that is among the top three. Better personal life experiences of service and support raise employee expectations. This is just what it is, and we discussed this already. If these satisfied employees, that's another, quote you find in the internet and everywhere, means also, happy employees also means happy customers. So I think there's, no doubt that this is probably one of the key drivers. And then, business function often process requests manually. That's a matter of fact. We often saw, in business functions, people still working with spreadsheets, to pick up that one again. And what is even, that could work even, but I think what is really one of the big challenges there is that this also leads to this also shows an inconsistency in service and support between different lines of businesses. And Roy had a nice example before. If there is like a sales report, HR service or whatsoever, it involves other business functions, like, for example, IT, who provide the infrastructure services, the applications, database access, and the like. And then, information from other departments like finance and you name it. So they all need to work together. And with spreadsheets, you can imagine that's that's a dead end. Let's be very broad on that. So it means that between shared service providers within a company, this can be a very painful experience for everyone involved, for the employees, but also for the departments themselves. And then number three, I pick that one here from this list of bullets because that's also something we experienced and saw within ITSM. It's a lack of standardization. For example, disparate tools across business functions, which inhibit this back office operations transformations, but also a nice tie-in later to look a little bit forward here into this presentation, which might be one of the reasons why, for example, a service catalog also is prominent across ESM use cases. So having that said, what is a solution, to the challenges and to these triggers, and again, solution in terms of, and this is very, very high level when I use the word low, this really means like, what are the requirements that an ESM solution needs to fulfill, and what should an ESM solution look like, not just functionally, to pick this easy to use self-service here, but also from a non-functional perspective, like you want to leverage, and now we approach also, you want to, this is, as Roy said, definitely, that's really in the beginning. But then in the end, also the solution into the business function, because this gives you leverage effects by ideally having a single service management solution across lines of businesses in the end. So that's very important. And then to pick one more thing here, because I always found that hard to understand, is you also need to understand what the focus will be. Looking at the last bullet on the list here, will you rather look on an outcome-based versus a process-centric approach? And this is a rhetoric question, because it's not an either or, because you need to know what it is that you want to get out of your initiative, if you like, implement a service management solution for your HR department. You don't want to look at the process as a process and say, hey, let's do a process improvement, let's make it faster, let's automate the process. You really want to look at what the outcome is as opposed to the output of the process. And again, this is not an either or, but you need to understand what the outcome is before you really can think about the process and how to automate it and how to make it how to support it with intelligent technology. So that's, I think that's an important aspect to understand before you really dive into probably one of the next steps where you want to think about, okay, how can you leverage your ITSM solution that you already have in place if you not belong to the 69% who obviously already gained quite some experience in doing that. So having that said, we have another poll, Roy, I think.
Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, so if you go back to the vote tab, I will go ahead and launch that vote. And this one is about how you're getting this done. And the question is whether you have implemented or plan to implement an ESM solution, what's your priority for the implementation? Are you starting with the self-service portal, a service desk for tickets, cases, or incidents, knowledge base, automation of workflows and tasks, or something else? So how are you planning to implement? What's your priority list? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's your big priority for the implementation of management? Get some responses in, and I'll just put this question up on the slide along with the responses. So make sure you're in the vote tab to respond. Good, we got responses coming in. I'm going to leave that open for another few seconds. And now I'm going to stop the voting now. And let's let that tabulate. Oh, looks like we have a very even split. We have about 28% who say self-service portal is their priority. 28% said service desk for tickets, cases, and incidents. About 14% for knowledge base, but 28% again for automation of workflows. So three-way split, pretty even: self-service portal, service desk for tickets, automation of workflows, and then coming in underneath that with 14% said knowledge base is their priority. So several different approaches to get the job done. I don't know I don't think there's a right way to do it. I think that it has to fit the way your organization does things and what your biggest priority is. If people have been screaming at you to get self-service in place, then that's an absolutely good reason to get your self-service portal in number one. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, I mean, it's all about the customer/employee experience again, and about the efficiency in the back end, if you want, right? So, we expected, or I expected that, and it pretty much again confirms your findings, Roy, as well as my findings, as we'll see on the next slide. So. My findings are more like anecdotally, let's put it that way, from talking to customers and our, salespeople, and you are really the result of a survey. So this is a nice match, yeah.
And I would just mention, you mentioned earlier that there's a saying that happier employees make happier customers, better service, and we know that that's true. We've actually looked into some of the results from our annual research and looked at the companies that said that they had satisfied or very satisfied employees and looked at that against their customer satisfaction ratings. And the customer satisfaction ratings were, on an average, 5% higher in organizations that had high employee satisfaction. So it really does work.
Yeah, that's great, yeah. So that brings me to, extend your proven service management success into other departments. Again, this is like, it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy here, by the way. It's this is also how ITSM started. I mean, in the early days, I think most, if not all, of customers, clients I know about started with what in the IT world is called incident management. And later on, when technology advanced, that got I think the service catalog and service request management probably got on top. So that's sort of what we see here in this mini survey as well from the audience. So ticket management, and by the way, I say ticket, coming from an ITSM world, as most of us probably, but depend on who you talk to, and that is important if you engage with your business functions and line of businesses is language. Sometimes it's called a case, like I think in HR. It also could use different words. So ticket, case, you name it, right? So that's important to understand. What I have in addition here is analytics-driven change management, because change management often, to my experience, is yet another step more to gain back-end efficiencies and get errors out of the system than anything else, and to keep things up and running. But I'll comment on that on the next slide, which really is about a solution in terms of a tool, not a tool. This is Micro Focus SMAX, and it's all about service management automation at a low total cost of ownership. And let me really, looking at the clock here, otherwise I get a red signal. Let me pick one, because this is what the webinar is all about. It's about ESM, but it's also about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and analytics, to use three terms, and they are in relation to each other. So in terms of SMAX, what this really means is that, it says on the slide, you get immediate responses and satisfied users. That is my marketing pitch. I'm very honest about that, or our marketing pitch. It's not only me. But what is behind that in terms of capabilities, without getting too technical here, just to give you an idea of how real that is in a service management solution like SMAX, and how important that also is for ESM. Let me mention a few things here. For example, starting with the user, with the employee or a customer. If you implement the customer support desk with that solution, is what we call automatic ticket creation from a picture. So it uses OCR technologies combined with other technologies in the back end that makes it very easy to open a case, a ticket, whatever you name it, for somebody who is not talking IT. So you take a snapshot, of a screen or of whatever, of a text message typically, and then the system makes sense out of that and creates a case / ticket from that. And this also leads me into the back end automation using AI via what we call smart ticketing. Then it tries to categorize the ticket to find what service is being impacted by the ticket, who needs to receive the ticket. So it does some ticket forwarding and things like that. And by the way, let's call this person the service desk agent. This can interact and correct things so that the system can learn, right, while categorizing these tickets. Then there is smart search. Smart search means like, yes, the solution has a knowledge database, which is, sort of like indexed, what we all know how this sort of looks like, but it goes far beyond that. It also can look on any other data in the service desk, like incident changes. It also can look at SharePoints, by the way, in order to find articles that match a search phrase. It's very similar to the popular search engines, from the internet, without naming those. So we all know what this means. And then very, very important, but I really need to close with this one, but it's really, this is a hot thing, and we call that hot topic analytics, by the way, because this, among other things, really can discover patterns of, for example, recurring incidents for proactive problem management, or other data, by the way, for example, to improve change management by identifying patterns in failed changes, for example. And again, going back to this outcome-based versus process-based, this really gives you the capability to figure out what the level of automation of your change management is, what the ratio of failed changes is, and where you can, tweak things in order to automate that more and make that more intelligent moving forward. And then the other things on the visual, I leave them there because I talked about them. Automation, self-service. But one thing I really have to mention, I said I didn't do that, but this is under quick time to value, because you just don't find that on the visual. This is what we call codeless configuration, which allows you to easily create new workflow-based applications without the need to write any code. Without the need to write any code. That's really very important to understand. And quick time to value also includes the capability that you can run the solution on premise in the private and public cloud, and that we also offer different license and term-based options dependent on your business needs. So that really was the, in a nutshell. And on the next slide, on the next slide, after the next slide, I give you some more pointers for information. What I also want to mention that we just recently have been named again a leader in the Forrester ESM Wave. And there is a link on this blue box that says read the report. There you can get a copy of the report if you don't have one already. And let me just say that according to Forrester, and this nicely closes on the ESM and AI themes, they said that, like, Micro Focus provides one of the most intelligent service management platforms currently available, including uniquely advanced automated change risk scoring. I talked about that, and proactive change optimization suggestions. So this is a pick from the report I've chosen, which nicely connects the themes ESM, change management, and AI. And by the way, the solution has been built on AI using Micro Focus idle technology. So there is nothing, that has been integrated after the fact. This really has been built on that technology. For more information, and there is many more information if you go to the website that was on this Forrester Wave slide I had before, but I picked 4 things here. One is very nice. If you belong to these 30%, or if you just want to see what we say there, and you think about still, what is ESM? Can I get it like a 3-minute explanation? This nice video. So includes the quote from Stephen Mann. Actually, we worked together with Stephen Mann from ITSM Tool to create this ebook. This is really very, very good information from the digital transformation to what are the requirements and what are the best practices you should follow if you think about implementing an ITSM solution. And then there is other analyst reports in addition to the HDI findings we talked about today. With that, I would leave it there and open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Michael. We just have a little bit of time for questions today. And I think these are probably ones that you've touched on, but maybe you can just answer them explicitly, quick answer. Can I create my own enterprise service management workflows with SMAX?
Yes, you can. And I saw this question, and this is why I decided to quickly talk about it. There is a white paper also on microfocus.com/smax that gives you some more details, not really the how-to, but it's called Fast Track Enterprise Service Management Applications with Codeless Configuration, and it really describes what you get there from designing this workflow, how you design it, how do you define the data, how you define the workflow, and how you put it into the list of applications within SMAX. That's all being outlined there. It's not a user manual, but it nicely describes what it is, the values and benefits, and hopefully makes you think like, let's have a look at that. So yeah, you can.
And then the other one that I think you also touched on is, does SMAX run in the cloud?
Yeah, it does. So SMAX, Micro Focus SMAX, has been built on latest container and Kubernetes technology. And honestly, I'm not a deep expert in that, but I understand what that means. And among many things, this also means that it's very flexible in terms of deployment where you can run it. And actually, what we support is AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. Yeah, so from the top of my head. But again, you find more information in the collateral you also find on the web page.
Right, and remember that there are attachments and links in the attachments tab right on your BrightTalk window that will take you to some of that information as well. So we're very short on time now, so I'm going to close out. First, I'd like to thank Michael for joining us today, and to the sponsor, Micro Focus, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please join us for our next webinar coming up in November. And just to let you know that this webcast is copyright 2019 by Informa. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of HDI, many thanks for your time, and have a great day.